Millions took to the streets for the second annual Women's March. This is the 1-year anniversary of the first one. It happened all over the country, people flocking to the streets outside the Capitol in Washington, D.C., major cities all around the country. And a lot happened. One thing was absolutely hilarious. Let's start with this photo. So this is a photo of people are looking up at this wall. Now, you'll see things, let's zoom in on one aspect of it, this guy. So people were cheering very loudly, and this guy thought that they were cheering for him. Woohoo, according to Frank Lesser, who's a comedy writer. Okay, let's go to the next photo. But actually what everyone was cheering for was this woman at the top dressed as Superwoman, and everyone was going crazy. And as you see in this photo, which is one of my favorites, there she is. Let's go back to the previous one. You can see the guy who was like really happy the folks were cheering for him, looking up at other people who are then pointing at this woman with her arms raised. It is absolutely hilarious. It's that moment where you think people are looking at you. And actually, no, they're not at all. They're cheering for something way more interesting over your shoulder. It's her. All right, so that happened. Thoughts, 5 words or less.
Oh, the vanity.
Obnoxious or oblivious?
Hers is bigger than yours, bruh.
What a Superwoman. That's pretty amazing. This is like so different from the norm, but so easily identifiable. Like I've been that guy 100,000 times.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
And I'm not mad at this. Like I don't know if the internet response, because I was just looking at the guy's Twitter. I don't know if anyone was like backlashing against this guy. I don't think they should. I think it's just sort of a funny sequence, and I think he described it as like a big metaphor, like a visual, photographic metaphor of sort of what we're working for.
Good.
I was going to say I have to agree. I think we could be looking. Into it a little bit too much with a bit of a negative scope. You know, for me, when I look at that, this guy walked out in his underwear to kind of check out what was going on. He started getting cheered, and he's like, all right, what do I either retreat or embrace it?
Right,
and he went, all right, let's do it. 10 seconds later, he went, oh my God, they're not even looking at me. What do I do, what do I do?
No, what you do.
And I can identify with that. I'm an idiot, and I do that all the time.
Xavier, what you do after you realize that it's not about you, is you make it about the other person. It's all about the recovery, not about the failure.
And you're exactly right.
We're basing this off of photos, so we don't know exactly how he recovered. He might have totally done that. It might have been this really funny moment among like this section of the crowd and those people in the balconies where he turned around. He's like, "Oh, whoopsies, yay!" Like this is probably such a small moment that has gotten blown up, which is okay. But let's not be.
So whether or not it was a symbolic moment of the white male wanting notoriety for their support of women, I don't know, and I tend to think we might have looked into it a little bit much, in my opinion.
Yeah, in your opinion, I agree with you 100%. So it should be more celebratory, because the reason why that picture was taken was because of something wonderful and amazing happening for a second time that is needed today in our society. And Brett, you had said you've been that guy 100 times. Isn't it the absolute worst, you guys, when you're like, first of all, you see someone at like Pizza Rev, you think you know them, you're like, hey, and you're like having a full-on like non-verbal conversation, like,
yeah.
And then they're talking to Ruben behind you, and you're like,
it's little things that are very photographable that can be embarrassing. Like, do you remember when? I'm pretty sure this is true, but someone fact check me. When George W. Bush was caught waving at Stevie Wonder. Do you remember that?
Those moments are terrible.
Like, and that sucks, and it's easily photographable because it's a gesture. And like that's the thing with this guy. If he had just gone out on his balcony, he might have privately felt that that they were cheering for him and just sort of like puffed out his chest a little bit. But you can't capture that on a photo. It's an easily shared, almost real life comic strip because you can see it all in the motions, and that's why it got shared so much.
It got shared so much also because dude had Eggplant Friday going on too. He was in his drawers, his da-dum-da-dum.
He did.
Yeah, he was like full on.
What is Eggplant Friday?
Bam, Google it.
What's Eggplant Friday for those of us without internet?
So Eggplant Friday was something that happened on Instagram where you could see people's visible penis lines, like semi-erect, half-erect, organs through gray sweats or underwear.
So, I remember that.
Yeah,
the gray sweat thing.
I tried to get on that bandwagon. No one was at hashtag Eggplant Friday me.
Go see Jason's Instagram update from Good Morning Albuquerque. I don't think it's a wrinkle. I don't think it's a wrinkle.
It's a wrinkle, people. But I think that's one of the reasons why this picture also was kind of like, it's because he's in his undies.
And also that she is wearing a Supergirl onesie as well. So it's not like they were cheering another woman that just had like that just came out with her comment. And they're like, not you, the woman. You know, like this is the women's march. She has like a whole getup on.
Did anyone go to the marches?
I was there on Saturday in downtown.
Nice, thank you for saving this panel.
Yeah.
What was it like? Where did you go?
It was good. I was in it was in downtown, and I noticed it wasn't it was quite calm, you know, like everyone was like pretty peaceful, and it wasn't as I've been to other protests and marches down there, and it was a lot less of an aggressive vibe that I picked up. You know, I wasn't there for the brunt of it, but just the general vibe. I mean, it seemed like people were really there for a good cause, bringing in people they loved, and then probably going to go to brunch after, you know, and it was good. It was kind of peaceful. I enjoyed it.
I would understand it would be peaceful because, you know, after Charlottesville and the way things have changed in the last 24 months, people are now realizing how to effectively and peacefully protest, they're probably realizing that you don't have to be rancorous or violent to get your point across.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a fair comparison to bring up Charleston versus the Women's March, because they're just too. I don't know.
He's drawing a contrast.
Right, yeah, but I mean the Women's March.
Like a bunch of people can get together and it doesn't have to turn to shit.
Yeah, it just didn't have that aggressive feel that I've seen before.
I agree, Xavier. What I was saying though is that not to compare, but just to say that we're now
But that was like the Charleston was like a gathering of white supremacists, and then people like were. Charlottesville, and like there were like counter protesters. The Women's March was like from the jump. Yeah, like we are pro, like we're pro this, we're pro all of this.
But I still think though that you can look at any of those protests and take away and extrapolate things you don't want to happen at your protest. I mean, they're all examples of protesting. Charlottesville, of course, was nowhere not based on anything as positive and as peaceful as the Women's March. However, it's like. I mean, how do I articulate this?
I definitely get scared when I think of a bunch of people in one place. I mean, that's one of the reasons I didn't go. It's just I was like, I don't want to be down there when someone takes out a gun. I mean, it's a real fear, and I'm articulating that. And it's great. It's really great to see that it turned out so positively and awesome.
And
not to say that I would assume anyone within that movement would do something terrible. It's just like you never know. I get social anxiety in giant groups like that.
Continuing is also really powerful.
Right, exactly.
That it's like a movement that now you can mark your calendar, and hopefully there'll be like a Women's March next year.
It wasn't just a thing. It's now something that exists.
It's not going out of fashion.
Right.
Other thing, did you see this poem?
By
Halsey?
Yeah.
Actually, yes, it was amazing.
Blew my mind.
Right.
I hate poems. Generally, and when it started, I said "boo" out loud because she was rhyming. That was unfair of me. By the end, I was like emotional. Just to tell people what the poem was.
Okay, well, she's a songwriter, and she says that she was asked to speak and she wanted to speak, but ultimately, like, she really only knows how to speak and speak publicly. She feels more comfortable when it rhymes, so it's like sort of a spoken word poem. I can't remember what's the name of it, the title of the poem. In any case,
basically framed as a bunch of accounts. It's starting with like different years that things that fall in line with sexual misconduct and the Me Too movement and Time's Up.
Yeah, Time's Up, Me Too, and it walks through different stages of her life when she's incredibly young to things that happened with her friend at Planned Parenthood or like at an abortion clinic or something, and then walking all the way through to 2016 or 17, where she's talking about that she's famous and she's blown up and she feels like that affords her a certain level of security, and then pointing out that it doesn't, and that she's still is having these really like awful things happen to her. I feel like I'm not really doing it justice.
Just go listen to it.
Yeah, just go listen to it. But it basically walks through different stages of her life and how she relates to Me Too and how she relates to the movement and speaking out.
It made her so relatable as well. Her just accounting her personal accounts with this, and especially like what you said, jumping from 2002 to 2012 to 17, and showing all these things that had happened to her and how relatable it was for all the poor people out there who can relate to it. Was incredible. And Halsey's always been someone for me I've been meaning to investigate in and work out why she's so big, you get that moment where you say, I get it, and I totally had that watching her, and it wasn't even anything to do with music. Like,
you're right, she's so relatable, Xavier. I had the opportunity, and not that I'm name dropping, but
yes, do it. You want credibility around here.
I had the opportunity to actually exist and be in the same space with Halsey, and what you saw during the women's movement is exactly the same person that she is when she's not being
That's
Halsey.
awesome.
She's super just humble and very just, about like just being more about you shining than her. And for her being so young, when I heard that poem, I thought, Jesus, like for that to she must be at least in her mid-20s to late 20s to have gone through all that. And then that poem, I cringed because her friend and things that happened to her. And then when she said, I'm famous, I'm rich, I have all these things, but yet nothing, no one is safe. That was a perfect example of how to use your reach to send a message and to really just.
Yeah, you think Halsey was being pretty ballsy?
Yeah, Halsey was being very ballsy.
Also, I'd like to shout out Viola Davis as well.
Nope, we don't have time.
Okay.
Just kidding. I'm kidding. We do have time.
And ScarJo.
Yeah, and Scarlett Johansson as well. But Viola Davis had a great moment in her speech where she said, we have to recognize that we are speaking out, but there are still countless women and men and survivors that are silent.
Yeah.
And we need to recognize that as well. And so I think that was just an important point to bring up, that while it's great that we are so many people are having this moment where they can speak freely and they can join in and find community in this hashtag, there's still so many people who are suffering in silence. And just to give that a moment I thought was also powerful.
Exactly right. And with Halsey, I just loved how she brought to light that even as a celebrity, they're not safe. And I feel like she completely brought herself down to the realm of everyone else and made her completely relatable in that fact.
Yeah. Scarlett Johansson, we saw her speak. Who else? There's so many people in just like a baseball cap. That was also like Mila Kunis holding the microphone.
Yeah,
Scarlett Johansson. It's like no one's. It's just everyone's out there together, and it's a really.
With ScarJo though, people today are like, okay, so she had brought James Franco, and she didn't directly say James Franco,
She
but
said, "Give me my pen back."
But so today, people were like, "Well, I don't understand Scarlett, and this is not how I feel. I'm glad she did what she did, but you starred in several Woody Allen movies." And now you're over here calling out James Franco, but yet when it was great for your career to work with someone who's been accused of the same things that James Franco's been accused of, it's okay. It's such a polarizing thing when it shouldn't be. It should be like, this what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong.
Do you think that she kind of called herself out a little bit in that respect, where she said, now I'm making a personal goal of mine to not be pandering?
Yeah.
And say, look, because for me, she kind of identified that she may have been guilty of what you just said, and that she's sort of taken a stand and said, but from now on, no more of that.
I agree with what you're saying. I felt that was something she alluded to as well in her speech when she said there was like, this is what I've been living by and I want to share it with you guys, no more pandering. The pin comment though, I was surprised that people were pinning that on James Franco, because when I saw that, I viewed it as more of an all-encompassing thing to maybe a number of different men who perhaps have like spoken their allegiance to the movement, and she felt that they were unworthy. So I didn't associate it immediately with James Franco, but apparently like the internet did.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about that. Perhaps there was another like context clue within there, but I think that her speech was a little bit broader, and I would like to focus on just what the women that did speak and what they said and the implications of that, rather than like dragging in James Franco. But I could be wrong. Maybe we should be dragging him in more.
It's all part of the same conversation. We can have different parts of the conversation at different times. It's difficult to have the entire conversation at once. So let's have that in mind when we get into little pockets of the conversation, I think. It was interesting, Alison Brie did say, because that's James Franco's sister-in-law, she was like, they were like, what do you think about all these accusations about James Franco? And she said, in a pretty diplomatic answer, it is still okay, and I encourage any woman who feels that she has been put in any position that made her feel uncomfortable, I encourage them to essentially speak out.